someone in some basement in some place in the South Pacific will come up with a nuclear weapon. So by your standard, you have now created a pretext and an excuse for nullifying the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And then the obvious question is, then what was the point of it? What you're doing is you're setting up a double standard in the world. The double standard is the nuclear powers have the right to keep their nuclear weapons because somewhere, someplace, sometime, someone might develop a nuclear weapon, but the rest of the world, the other 180 signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, they have no right to have nuclear weapons. So 5 countries have the right to protect themselves, but what about the 180 other countries? If someone, somewhere, someplace, sometime might develop it, they might want to develop it against Iran, not against Russia, not against China, not against the US, not against the UK, not against France. They might want to use it against Iran, maybe Saudi Arabia, for all I know. But they are not, Iran is not allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. But the US, UK, France, Russia, and China are. So you create a double world. Some people can protect themselves, but the 180 other signatories are not allowed to. Is that fair? A fundamental principle of international law is the equality of sovereignty of states. States are equal under international law. That's the most fundamental principle of our international system. That's why a state of 100 people has the right to be in the UN General Assembly with 1 vote, like the US has 1 vote. But you have now created a 2-tier world. 5 countries can protect themselves against someone, somewhere, someplace, sometime, but the 180 other countries don't have that right.
Okay, Dr. Finkelstein, stay with me. Let me get Mr. White's perspective in on that. Mr. White, if we look at what Dr. Finkelstein has just discussed, do you think that based on that premise then, we're looking at a very, very dangerous situation when, according to what he says, you have this 2-tier situation, this 2-tier system, and that, of course, then you have those who are, if you want to say, on the top and wanting to keep that power and always trying to make sure that they oppress the others. Do you not see it basically being problematic to begin with that premise?
Again, 2 points. First, I think that the reference to the United Nations was a good one, and I remind everybody that the UN itself, the structure of the UN, just like the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, bends this rule of equality to take into account international realities. There are 5 countries in the United Nations, precisely those countries that have nuclear weapons illegally, that have the right to veto UN resolutions in the Security Council. This is a permanent right. They don't have to stand for re-election like the other UN Security Council members. They can use the veto to block decisions even if 180 other countries support an act. Again, this is a bending of the rule to take into account a reality. The League of Nations didn't do this, and the League of Nations collapsed because the great powers defied it. I would agree, though, it is a dangerous world. It would be better if we had no nuclear weapons. The problem is, how do you get there without resulting in a worse situation? That's always been the fear. You know, if every country starts to eliminate the nuclear weapons, let's say the United States would implement that immediately. Most countries would applaud it. Some countries, Japan, Taiwan, Germany, perhaps a few others, Saudis, Turkey, might decide this is not good. The U.S. has promised to defend us with their nuclear weapons. If they don't have these nuclear weapons, we have to figure out how to defend ourselves. And the most likely option, or at least not mostly, but a plausible option would be for them to go after and seek nuclear weapons. So the U.S. has always argued that its extended nuclear deterrence guarantees is a means of limiting the spread of nuclear weapons, because these countries don't need them, because the U.S. has offered to use its own to defend them.
Okay, I want to, because we're running out of time.
I wonder if I
very
could just
rapidly.
briefly reply.
Okay, 1 minute if you could, Dr.
Okay.
Finkelstein.
Richard is right. There is a two-tier system in the United Nations where the 5 nuclear powers, as it happens, have the right of veto. The problem, Richard, with that argument is those people who joined the General Assembly in the United Nations, they agreed by becoming members to that two-tier system. But the signatories to the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, they didn't agree to a two-tier world. They insisted on Article 6, which says the nuclear powers will eliminate their nuclear weapons, and in turn, we will agree not to develop them or acquire them. They never agreed to 2 tiers. The International Court of Justice did not agree to 2 tiers. In paragraph 99, the International Court of Justice said that the nuclear powers have to eliminate those nuclear weapons stockpiles. The second point, very quickly, is you said, how do we get to our desirable endpoint? There is a very simple way. There is a midpoint. There is an end goal and a midpoint. The midpoint is, around the world, various regions have signed weapons of mass destruction free zones, have created weapons of mass destruction free zones. The easiest way to begin is to create a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East, a proposal that Iran and Egypt made already as far back as 1974. They've made that proposal. Right now, the International Panel on Fissile Material, headed by Professor Frank von Hippel at Princeton, just a month ago, they said again, let's create a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. So if I were to agree with you for argument's sake, it's hard to get to the end point. Why not get to the midpoint? Iran is on record as supporting a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East.
Dr. Finkelstein, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I have to interrupt you. Mr. Weitz, just following up on that same question, as I'm sure you know, the United States has been opposed to that nuclear free zone in the Middle East that Dr. Finkelstein talked about, and also Israel itself. Why do you think that is the case? Why would the United States be against a nuclear free zone in the Middle East if, as for example, what he said, at least that could be the beginning of the start to end the nuclear weapons in the world?
The Obama administration supports having a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. It's been actively negotiating with the other countries to try and achieve it. This is one of the issues that caused a lot of problems between Israel and the United States at the 2010 NPT review conference, because the U.S. insisted on supporting this measure.
Yes, but Richard,
that said,
in 2012,
we've run into problems with the Arab Revolution.
Yeah, but Richard, in 2012, why was the meeting canceled? There's no dispute about that. There was supposed to be a meeting on the question of a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. Why was it canceled? Because Israel told the U.S. they were opposed to it, and the U.S. forced the cancellation of the agreement. Let's be honest about that. I don't want to have an argument with you. You seem like a very decent guy. I find your arguments interesting, intellectually stimulating, but let's be honest. Iran is on record. It wants to create a WMD free zone in the Middle East. Who is the obstacle? Israel told the United States no, and then the U.S. forced the cancellation of the meeting.
On that
and that's
note,
not ancient history. That was the end of 2012.
And on that note, I am so sorry. A very interesting discussion. Wish we could continue, but we are out of time. I'd like to thank both my guests, Dr. Norman Gary Finkelstein here in the studio with me, political science activist and author, and out of Washington, Richard Weitz, PhD director and senior fellow, Hudson Institute. And as always, viewers, we appreciate you being with us for another debate. Make sure you join us right here, same time tomorrow. I'm Marzieh Hashemi, signing out. Goodbye.